This is the OFN today as we wrap up week one with a week one game of the week. Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Tom Brady in his first start for the Bucs, and it didn't go all too well for Tom. Saint fans weren't there to witness it. But we did, and that's why we are going to all. In case you had an opportunity to watch it or you didn't, either way, Ross Jackson is here and David Harrison is here. They cover their respective teams, Tampa Bay and New Orleans, for the Locked On Podcast Network. Guys, thanks for doing this.
We appreciate you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
You got it. All right. So, first, Ross, Tell us a little quickly about your background with the Saints Podcast Network, Locked On Podcast Network.
Oh, yeah. No, I've been hosting the Locked On Saints show for a little bit over 2 years. I'm also the NFL and college channel coordinator with the network, and I'm also a writer over at the Canal Street Chronicles. So I've been writing and talking about the New Orleans Saints all my life, but I've been paid to do it here over the last couple of years.
And you're David's boss.
Not really. I'm a coordinator. I'm a coordinator for the channel that he's a part of.
Okay. David.
Sir.
Tampa Bay, Locked On Podcast Network. Tell me quickly about that.
Yeah, I've been doing Locked On Podcast Network. This is my third full season with the network covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, also right over at SB Nation as well with BucsNation.com.
All right. And you can check out their Twitter handles right there on our ticker. Let's get right to it, guys. And you guys are gonna be able to jump in. And if you don't jump in, I'm gonna force you guys to ask each other questions. I'm gonna get it started. I've got to start off with Mr. Tom Brady over here, David Harrison. Got to go there. So, David, how was it? No preseason games, TV on. Tom Brady steps up to the huddle wearing a Tampa Bay Buccaneer uniform.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, those new uniforms look clean, and I think that's really where we need to start with this whole thing. Is that those new uniforms look pretty slick, and Tom Brady looks pretty good in it. Usually, when you see an all-time great change teams, it takes a little bit of time to get used to it. And I'm sure the Patriots fans are still probably trying to get used to it and cope with seeing him in there, but. I look. You look just across. Just up the coast rather. Cam Newton in a Patriots uniform. You've had one full Sunday of that. It still doesn't look right. But Tom Brady coming out in a Buccaneers uniform, it looks good. He looks comfortable in it. And on that first drive, I mean, the entire unit looked really comfortable, and they kind of came out maybe a little bit smoother, a little bit better than you really expected them to. And I think maybe the Saints defense, honestly, maybe didn't expect them to come out as coordinated and as smooth as they did. And then. I mean, the Tom Brady quarterback sneak for the touchdown, you just have to love that at 43 years old. I mean, who doesn't love a 43-year-old man forcing his way into the end zone? I think that may have been a mistake, though, because after that, it was almost all Saints. And I'm almost wondering if they were sitting on the sideline saying, hey, we can't let that dude do that to us. And then they came out after that, Janoris Jenkins with the huge pick six. I mean, you don't want to make jokes about PTSD, but I think every Buccaneers fan had flashbacks of a lot of Jameis Winston interceptions when that happened.
This was supposed to change.
Late on the out route, too high, too inside. Janoris Jenkins. I mean, you can't throw that kind of pass against that kind of a veteran and expect to get away with it. He absolutely punished Brady and the Buccaneers for it. I mean, just for the rest of the night, it was just a struggle to get anything going. You did see some good after that first drive, but really for the rest of the night, it was mostly Saints. The Bucs did very little to almost nothing to build on for week two, but there are some things to build on for week two. So not all hope is lost. Again, like everybody's kind of having to rally around one game out of 16. The year is not over by a long shot.
Yeah. And look, as an outside observer, there's no question in my mind that both of these teams have the talent to be in the playoffs, to compete for a Super Bowl title. Michael Thomas wasn't 100% the whole game. Evans wasn't 100% the whole game. It's Brady's first game. There's no fans in the stands. I mean, fans do get carried away, Ross, with week one, week two. And as a Saint fan, because usually the Saints get off to slow starts. Okay, they got the win, but there's just so much that both teams can improve upon. And even if you look at the Saints, it wasn't like they lit up the scoreboard statistically.
Right.
Breeze had 160 yards passing, and the leading rusher had 48 yards.
Just 48 yards, yeah.
You would have never known that by the score, by scoring 34 points. So there's a lot left in the tank for both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Saints have a lot to work on, particularly over on the offensive side, waiting for that to settle in, just like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These teams are both just going to continue to get better all throughout the season. Neither of them having much of an offseason. Even the training camp that they had was hardly even really a training camp. They only got 3 weeks to actually work with each other before everybody taking the field here into some very strange circumstances where at certain points the loudest thing in the Superdome, according to many of the beat writers that were there, was the field goal, the kicking net going up and the squeak of that sound being the loudest thing going on, music playing at a very low level. It was all very strange.
Yes.
Luke Johnson did a really great write-up on all the things that were weird about the game. That is really, really interesting. That has nothing to do with the play on the field. It has everything to do with just sort of the strange environment that they were a part of. But yeah, I mean, look, if I told you that Michael Thomas at the end of this game had 3 catches for 17 yards, ended up with a high ankle injury by the end of it. Drew Brees completed only 60% of his passes for 160 yards, the 8th time since 2017 that he's thrown less than 200 yards in a game, and that Alvin Kamara rushed for 13 yards, 16 yards in this one, and then up until up until 2 minutes and 33 seconds left in the game, he only had about 13 receiving yards as well. You would have said that the Saints lost this game, but Alvin Kamara also found the end zone twice during this game. And one of the big things was really special teams around this. The Saints able to start, I can't remember the number, able to start several drives. I want to say 9 drives or so, better than their own 35. So they were in really good field position consistently, while the Buccaneers never started a possession beyond their own 25 and started several of them within, including several drives within the 15. So spread this in terms of where these teams started. And then, of course, as David may mention, of the defense making a ton of plays here as well. They caused a turnover on special teams with the sort of pooch kick after the face mask penalty on the Emmanuel Sanders catch and run for a touchdown. And then they had the 2 interceptions, one of which being Janoris Jenkins' 8th pick 6 of his career, making him the active leader in interceptions for a touchdown in the NFL and tied for 5th all time as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun if they can get Evans healthy, and obviously if Michael Thomas and everybody is just, and we're into the season. When is the next contest?
Right at the midpoint of the season.
Okay.
Yeah, week 9.
Mm-hmm.
So that and hopefully there'll be fans at the game. Not that New Orleans cares at that point because they're no longer the home team. But that is something that we would look forward to. And again, I was really impressed. As much as we want to talk about Brees and Brady, and you would think it's going to be a high-scoring offensive affair, you really had to be impressed with what you saw by both teams defensively. And David, defensively, the Bucs. Wow, I mean, now with White in year 2, he looks so much better, and with David up there, linebacking tandem, and the DBs played well. There's so much to think positively about this game. There's a lot of teams that lost on Sunday that are just, especially fan bases, cringeworthy losses. But this wasn't a cringeworthy loss for the Bucs. There's a lot to like, especially what happened on defense. It was interesting. When the Bucs had all the momentum, it looked like when Cook had that big pass, I think it was on 3rd down, it might have been, and it was like a 25-yard pass. It was when all the Bucs had all the momentum, and it seemed like it was one of the very rare times that Bowles blitzed. And I guess he should have blitzed every down. But still, you can't blitz every down. But when they did, they got a lot of pressure on Drew Brees. He's an old guy, just like when the Saints blitzed. There's a lot of pressure on Brady. He's an old guy. But like I said, there's a lot to take out of this positively if you're a Buck fan.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing about Drew Brees is he's so hard to sack and almost impossible to sack because he gets the ball out so quickly, and he's so cool under pressure. But I think the big thing, if you're a defense facing Drew Brees, is you've got to hold him true to that, and you've got to force him to get rid of that ball quick. It's okay that you can do it, but we're going to make you continue to do it. And you saw it on that Jared Cook play that Drew Brees actually came out, and he almost looked for that quick hit. There was a pump fake. I'm a little bit sold that he was actually about to throw it when he realized, hey, I've got more time. He sees Jared Cook running on the wrong side of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers cover 2. Backup safety Andrew Adams. Bruce Arians came out today and said he bit incorrectly on an inside route that left the coverage open above Jamel Dean. Because on the telecast, it looks like Jamel Dean. In fact, Troy Aikman even said Jamel Dean got lazy on the coverage and let Jared Cook go. However, Hey, that's the bugaboo of trying to evaluate what a secondary is doing. Unless you know what every assignment is, you don't know exactly what 100% every time what's going on. So Coach Arians did come out and back up one of his young studs in Jamel Dean and say that was on the safety. And if you go back and look at that play, you can see where Andrew Adams should have been, and that pass never would have been completed had he followed his assignment. So again, just going back to the do your job mantra. But yeah, you talk about Levante David. I mean, somewhat of a surprise captain there on the defense this year, getting voted by his teammates over guys like Jason Pierre-Paul, Shaquille Barrett. But he really showed in week one why. Him and Levante David each tying for the lead in the tackles for the entire game, not just for the Buccaneers, for both sides of the ball, each of them equally getting the same amount of tackles, both Buccaneers defensive captains coming through for their team in the clutch. And then Sean Murphy-Bunting came out, started that game on fire, took down Alvin Kamara and hit on his first touch behind the line of scrimmage, really gave the Buccaneers offense all the runway they needed to kind of get some ground, get some momentum, maybe put a score or two between them and the Saints before the Saints kind of caught up. Unfortunately, again, the offense just didn't do it, but the defense more than enough. There were a couple of penalties, there were a couple of mistakes, Vita Vea encroachment on fourth down. I mean, that's just terrible. But but overall, the defense definitely did enough to come out of New Orleans with a win. It's a team sport, three phases of the game. The Saints did better across all three phases. The Buccaneers really only did well in one.
If you look at it, it's one, and it's obvious to see how the Saints won when you just dissect three key plays for me. One, obviously the pick six. Two, the Vita Vea penalty, which gave up points, and then the 3rd and 13. Breeze, I'm just going to chuck it up into triple coverage, and the official decides I'm going to call pass interference. And I'm sorry, Ross, I hate that call. I hate when they bail out.
There were a few of those.
I hate when they bail out. Yeah, on both sides. I hate when they bail out the quarterback in that situation. And that's 7 points. Could have been 3. Maybe it was 0. So that right there, really, that's 17 points that the Saints took advantage of. That was the deciding factor in the game. And that's usually what happens when you have two good teams going up against each other. Which of the teams is going to take advantage of good calls, turnovers? That's exactly what happened. The Saints had it all, Ross, and that's why they won the football game.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of those things went their way, a couple of them didn't, and the Saints were just able to be opportunistic when they did go their way, and that ended up being the difference. You look at you mentioned the pick six for Janoris Jenkins. Janoris Jenkins talked about it after the game. Those speed outs is a favorite in Bruce Arians' offense. It was a favorite for them last year. They knew that play was coming at some point. They saw the formation that hadn't been run in the first half. Janoris and Marshawn Lattimore talked after or in halftime and saying, hey, we haven't seen that speed out yet. We're definitely going to end up seeing it in the second half. Keep your eyes open for this, that, and the other. And then Janoris Jenkins, as David mentioned earlier, when you've got a veteran across you, he's going to see those things in film study. And that's part of just being a smart football player. And then when you put it high and inside, you're just opening it up for him, and he, they put it on a platter for him and he took it. And that's just one of those things that just comes with one of the, what we talked about when we did the crossover for Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucks, was that Janoris Jenkins was going to be a big sort of X factor for the Saints defense, because that play is maybe at best a pass breakup against Ken Crawley and Eli Apple at best. And then at this point, maybe with Eli Apple, you get a pick. But when it comes down to Janoris Jenkins, he's going to see that coming and he's going to take advantage of it. And we certainly saw him do that. The Vita Vea count, I don't know how much the empty stadium had to do with that just the anticipation just feels so much greater because you're staring this guy in the face and there's nothing else around you. And the only thing you have to respond to is the quarterback's cadence. I don't know if maybe that makes it a little bit tougher to hold that discipline and hold composure.
Bad play.
But we talked about composure being a deciding factor.
That's right.
In this game, and that's an example of what that was, along with the special teams play with the two Bucs players running into each other or I don't know if they really ran into each other, but both of them going for the ball at the same time on the pooch kick. And then with the big pass interference penalty is like, look, wouldn't it be great if you could review it?
Probably not anymore. No, I think we've been down that road, and we know we don't usually get our way anyway. So, and look, like I was saying, it happens, and it's going to happen against the Saints this year. It just happens, and it's just the one thing that you deal with, and you don't with no preseason games. It's interesting how it comes up and just hits us so quick. So usually in the preseason we can start, bad call, and then we got 4 weeks of bad calls. But right away it's like, wow, wait a second. Oh, I forgot how much I hate bad calls. I forget how much I hate bad analysis. by the TV.
We saw that as early as the Thursday game too, with that missed false start that was blatantly obvious to everyone around the team, but ended up counting as a touchdown for the Houston Texans. I mean, it's one of the downfalls to not having the preseason is that even the refs aren't warned yet.
So, all right, David, give me the player that you were the most disappointed in, besides the quarterback?
The player I was most disappointed in easily is left tackle Donovan Smith. I mean, he was facing a backup edge rusher. I don't even know his name without looking it up.
Trey Hendrickson.
There you go, Trey Hendrickson. Yeah. Kudos to him. Looks like he came right out of Whitesnake video onto the field to play football for the Saints. Great night for him. Terrible night for Donovan Smith. I can only imagine what would have happened to Tom Brady if Marcus Davenport had actually been in that game. So I guess, in some sense, there's a silver lining there that he wasn't in that game. But yeah, I mean, Donovan Smith, he's getting killed on social media. Hopefully he's not in his mentions right now because he just needs to give it 24 to 48 hours, let it all simmer down and just try to come back against Carolina better and smarter, because we've seen him play better. Honestly, we've seen him play worse. And at the end of the day, I mean, this is the guy who's been under fire pretty much his entire career in Tampa. He no longer has that connection with Jameis Winston, them coming into the team in the same draft class. His contract has no guaranteed money next year. And granted, we got to get through 2020 first. But I mean, this dude's got to show that not only is he worth the contract the Buccaneers did give him a little while back, that he's worth the salary cap number that he's carrying into next season, that he's even worth being a starter this year. There's been a lot of conversations. I mean, me personally, I had kind of a private conversation with some other media members saying, look, I wouldn't be, afraid if I'm Coach Arians say next week, hey, listen, you get beat in a blow by one time against Carolina Panthers, which is a lesser quality defense than what the Saints brought onto the field, and you're on the bench, brother. You're getting replaced by Joe Haig or by somebody else, because that you can't allow that to happen when you have a 43-year-old quarterback that cannot escape pressure the way that the quarterback you let go or let walk out the door could have before.
All right, Ross, give me a player you were the most disappointed in.
I think probably over on the offensive side, I think I'd probably mention, I wasn't really disappointed in Michael Thomas, but obviously, you expected him to come out and have this huge game, but it was actually a good thing to see him not have that big of a game.
Yeah.
And the Saints still be able to pull out.
Sure, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it goes a little bit both ways, but obviously, like, the disappointment comes in the anticipation of Michael Thomas is going to play this weekend, and everybody gets very excited when he goes out there. So it's not necessarily that I'm disappointed in the player. It's more so that maybe he had some disappointing output of production, but it was actually kind of nice on top of that defensive and special teams performance that the Saints were able to put on, and on top of the offense still being able to get a couple of touchdowns here, that this Saints team can still win if Michael Thomas isn't able to perform, and they can win without it relying on him to catch, 17,000 receptions in a single season.
No, yeah.
That was a big part of getting Emmanuel Sanders in, which we saw pay dividends this week.
We talked a few weeks ago about the difference with the Saints in the regular season, and especially the last few years, in the postseason, has been the inability for them to run the football in the postseason. Mm-hmm. And first game, big game, and you don't get anything out of Kamara. Now, again, you get the receiving yardage and touchdown, and he's always going to be a weapon there. But again, if they're going to be dangerous in the postseason, they have to be able to run the football more effectively to take all of the pressure off of Drew Brees. 12 for 16 is not going to get it done.
No, not at all. But they also didn't lean on Alvin Kamara with the purpose of gaining yardage and having that kind of a game on the ground. They actually leaned more on Latavius Murray there. Now, Latavius Murray didn't have, humongous output, 15 carries for 48 yards, but Latavius Murray helped them convert when they needed a first down, helped them chew the clock when they needed to, things like that. And that was the intent. And that was the intent in this game plan. It wasn't that Latavius Murray was accidentally more effective than Alvin Kamara, or that he was surprisingly more effective. It was that the Saints utilized him in the situations where I think people are still expecting to see Alvin Kamara get used, and that's just not what's going to be the case this season. The Saints learned a lot about Latavius Murray last year and how to figure out a way to use both Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara in this offense, and it would not surprise me at all to see Alvin Kamara go sort of take the backseat as the lead running back in terms of touches on the carry side, much like the 2018, 2017 seasons when he played with Mark Ingram. And I think that's more of what you're going to see so that you can save Alvin Kamara in the moments that matter, which are in the red zone. Last year, he didn't get a ton of touches in the red zone. This time, he got a lot of attention in the red zone, and it paid off nearly 3 times when he was just a millimeter away from a third touchdown in Sean Payton's little "I'm going to try to rub this win in" moment, try to put that 40 get that 40 points up. But I think that the expectation for Kamara is different than what his actual usage was meant to be in that game.
Speaking of Payton, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. Correct me if I am wrong. He looked a lot heavier.
Oh, I don't know. That's not something I'm gonna make any comments on.
I mean, it looked like.
I'm not trying to get sued out here. No, I mean that might be. I mean, the guy, he had COVID, and that maybe that played a factor or.
Well,
or
it happens
like
to coaches all the time. Like sometimes, one year you
yeah.
see him and they look, like they're in shape, and the next year all of a sudden you're like, okay, better watch yourself, better get back into shape. But maybe it's just one of those things, like you said. Maybe he just didn't have the strength to work out as much. But yeah, I've never seen Sean look like he actually gained some weight. I mean, sometimes it's good.
Yeah, well, Sean's not going to be out there trying to be like Sean McVay taking his shirt off on Hard Knocks. You know what I mean? So Sean's doesn't have that kind of focus.
And again, look, I'm not talking about him with the mask has nothing to do with it. I'm just talking his overall. He looks like he was, maybe eating a lot of Cajun food over the last few months. So it's just, hey, it's cool. Super Bowl champ, got a lot of money.
We should all be. We should all be so lucky.
Yeah, I mean,
all right, speaking about running backs, I was really impressed with Ronald Jones. And just like I said with Peyton, with Jones, I hadn't seen him in a preseason, and all of a sudden I was looking at Jones running. I'm like, that's Ronald Jones? First, for a second, I thought it was Leonard Fournette. I was like, wait a second. When did he get so big? Because Ronald Jones was this little, fast running back that was all speed when he came into the NFL. And he's only been here for a little over a year. But, wow, they really did a great job of getting him to understand, because he's an inside runner, getting him to understand it. You're going to survive in this league, and you're going to really be able to up your game. You got to put on some weight, put on some strength, some muscle, and boy, he took advantage of it. And I'm telling you right now, Leonard Fournette's a nice pickup. To me, that's just a depth guy, because I'm going to make sure Ronald Jones is my workhorse.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Arians has said it multiple times that the running back one position for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is Ronald Jones's job until he loses it. Nobody's going to come in and take it from him. He's going to have to lose it. And at least from one game, again, the team didn't get the win. He didn't get into the end zone, but I mean, 66 yards on 17 carries, you can't really be too upset with that type of production. And if you take away the turnovers, especially the pick six, if you take away, the fourth down penalty that leads to a score by the Saints, you probably look at Ronald Jones getting 22, 23 carries, maybe even another catch in the ball game. That's kind of where we're all really looking to see Ronald Jones get better, is in the passing game, not just as a pass protector, but also as a receiver out of the backfield, because we know Tom Brady loves to utilize running backs out of the backfield. And yeah, Leonard Fournette, he came in, he was running harder when the game started than he kind of did as it went on. I went on record on Locked On Bucs, kind of talked about sometimes Leonard Fournette doesn't run with a real sense of urgency. He likes to dance a little bit. He gets a little bit of happy feet trying to find the hole and get through it instead of absorbing the contact or making the hole, which is really what he's more built for. And hey, man, I get it. I mean, running backs have a short shelf life as it is. If Leonard Fournette throws himself like a bowling ball into the defensive line every time, it's going to be even shorter. But at the same time, the team's paying you to fill that role. What really kind of confused me with the running game in Tampa is that it seemed like more, and I have to go back and watch the tape and count it if I really want to get into the weeds with it, but it felt like more often than not, when the Buccaneers try to run to the perimeter, they did it with Leonard Fournette instead of Jones. Yeah. And, that to me, we have to talk to Byron Leftwich. Unfortunately, by the time you talk to Byron Leftwich, it's going to be about Carolina, not about the Buccaneers or about the Saints. Right. So, I don't know if we'll ever get that answer. We'll have to see what they do in week 2. But, you'd like to see your burner and Rojo, because he has put on some weight to withstand that NFL punishment, but he's still quick as ever. He's still fast as ever. But yeah, an encouraging performance. So, I mean, looking to see more of him, hopefully against Carolina in week 2, but also hopefully seeing a little bit more of Leonard Fournette contributing as well.
More often than not, that's usually either the running back bouncing it out when he's not supposed to, or the offensive line not doing their job, being pushed back, and the running back decides, I got to go further to the outside. I would doubt seriously that the offense, Leonard Fournette, we got this big guy, and we're going to run sweeps to the left or sweeps to the right. So
hey, Jacksonville tried to do it a lot more often than they should have as well. So I mean, again, we got to go back and watch the film. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, perplexing question to ask.
Sounds good. All right. Speaking of questions to be asked, before I let you guys go, I want to let you guys ask each other questions. Ross, go ahead and ask Dave a couple of questions.
Yeah, I want to ask, actually, talking about that same thing with the run game. I want to know if you were surprised about the Tampa Bay's sort of inability to get going against particularly the Saints nickel set. The Saints only spent 3 different downs during this game with 3 linebackers on the field. They spent a lot of time in nickel and dime to prepare themselves for the offensive attack, particularly over in the pass. But when they were in the nickel set, this is an interesting thing from John Sigler over at Saints Wire. He mentioned that the average weight of defender in those nickel sets was 241 pounds. Of the 26 times that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ran, 22 of them were against that very light average weight nickel set, but they only got yards per attempt during that time. Did that have to do with the usage of those running backs like you were just talking about, or was there more of just getting beat at the line of scrimmage type of conversation?
I mean, probably just a little bit of both, but at the same time, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line, one of the biggest, the biggest question obviously is pass protection when you talk about Tom Brady, but going back to all the days with Jameis Winston, I mean, there's only one new offensive lineman on this group in front of Tom Brady, and that is rookie Tristan Wirfs, who really played very well in front of Cameron Jordan and held his own very well. But the biggest problem, well, the bigger underlying problem, I suppose, with this offensive line would be their run blocking. And that's kind of one thing when DeMar Dotson, at the end of last season, he went on a Buccaneers podcast, and they actually flat out asked him, they said, listen, you guys struggled in run blocking quite often. How do you kind of look at that? And he flat out said, listen, he's like, honestly, for me, run blocking is really not my thing, and I don't really enjoy doing it. And it was kind of at that moment where I said, DeMar is a really nice guy, great locker room guy, veteran. He's a leader, but this guy's got to go because this team needs to get that running game going. And I mean, you're going to see a little bit of residual of that. Again, 4/5 of that offensive line that, I mean, at least has one member on it saying run blocking is not really my thing. Yeah. When you talk about offensive lines, you know as well as I do, it's a single unit. It's 5 guys playing as a single unit. So if you've got one guy who doesn't like run blocking, well, what are the other 4 guys doing to encourage him to run block? So you have to almost think, well, maybe there's another guy or 2 on the offensive line that doesn't like run blocking. I don't think it's Ryan Jensen. Maybe it's Donovan Smith. I don't know, but that's going to affect all of those things, of course. And then just cumulatively with the offensive line, just going as an offense, getting going against that defense, pressure is cumulative. And I think go back to that pick 6. I think a little bit of that has to do with Tom Brady having that internal clock going off in his head, not wanting to take more time than he absolutely has to, and throwing that ball, because that's not a ball you usually see Brady throw. And I don't know many quarterbacks who say, yeah, you can go late to an out route. I mean,
right.
That's not, it's not typical Tom Brady football. So you almost kind of feel like, he's just feeling like, I got to get rid of the ball. I see Justin Watson coming open. I mean, if he puts it on the sideline, worst case scenario, it's incomplete. Best case scenario, it's a catch. But of course, because he's rushed, you feel like that inaccuracy on that pass is because of a little bit of rush that comes in again with that weakness on the offensive line, cumulative pressure. So I think all of it just kind of, as they went and couldn't keep up the momentum they had on that first drive, it just kind of, I don't want to say snowballed, but it just stacked on top of each other, got heavier and heavier as the game went on.
I don't think I've ever heard an offensive lineman not like to run block. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, offensive linemen, the whole idea at the line of scrimmage is to exert your will against the opposition, and you only do that if you run block, and your offensive line usually feels the most proudest when they kick the opposition's ass, and they do that in the run game. They pound and pound and pound. That is a very unusual answer for an offensive lineman.
Yeah, because I mean, in pass sets, I mean, you're basically automatically giving up ground. Usually
you can't
anywhere.
Pancake block when you're pass protecting.
A run set, a run block or a run play is really the only time as an offensive lineman you get the opportunity to try to dominate your opponent really fully. I mean, there's moments I suppose in pass sets, but so it was a weird thing for me to hear as well when I did. And I mean, hey, credit to DeMar for being honest. I love the guy.
Absolutely. But probably if I'm his agent, I don't really think you should have said that. Keep that to yourself.
He got a phone call after that. I can
probably. Ross, you got anything else?
No, I don't think so.
That was your main thing.
I think that's kind of the big one that I wanted to get at, because I was worried about the Buccaneers' run attack against what I knew was going to be a light Saints defense. And thankfully, we knew that both of these teams were going to be excellent against the run. We knew that. The Saints themselves only averaged 2.4 yards per carry as well, and so we knew that they were both going to be effective against the run. So I was just curious about where that might have come from.
David, what do you have for Ross?
Yeah, so I'm going to say I've got a couple questions actually, and one of them is not going to be so. I do have to mention, however, that I don't know, Ross, if you got a chance to listen to today's episode of our show reacting to the Buccaneers loss, but James did say apparently you can cover Mike. So that's something I was going to ask you how you felt about that, but you already answered that question, but I do have to get that in there or James will fire me from my own show. But staying in the trenches, we talked all season. Cesar Ruiz was a guy that was expected to come in there and really help shore up that New Orleans Saints offensive line. Hugely talented player, unfortunately unable to go. And then you got your center who you guys were expecting to move over to guard, right? As Ruiz came in there as a center. So now he's playing center. So a lot of plans just kind of messed up there with that injury before week one. How happy were you with the fact that they were able to give Drew Brees at least enough time? I mean, he didn't look totally clean either, but how happy were you with that offensive line against what's considered one of the better front sevens in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it really that latter point is where you sort of is the lens through which you have to see, right? You have to understand that this is a fantastic defensive line and a fantastic front seven on top of that, because they can get pressure from just about anywhere Tampa Bay can over on the defensive side. So when you use that as context to sort of set up the framework here, I was pleased with what I saw from the Saints offensive line, considering that, as you mentioned, Eric McCoy was expected to move to right guard. That wasn't able to happen. And we kind of knew that wasn't going to happen, but we only thought it was going to happen. It was not going to happen because Cesar Ruiz wasn't going to be ready to take over checks and protection calls and things like that. And so he would end up being at right guard. Instead, the Saints had to go with Nick Easton at right guard, who I'm not really sure has played right guard before. I know he's played left guard. He filled in for the Saints with Andrus Peat last year at right guard, but they really, at left guard, but they leaned on Will Clapp to fill in at right guard last year when Larry Warford was injured. So it was a little strange to see, but you saw glimpses of what it is that the Saints really wanted out of this offensive line. There was, the majority of the pressure in this game came from the interior, which is a big issue for the Saints. And as we've seen, particularly in the playoffs last year, that can be a big bugaboo for the Saints. I believe it was 5 of the 8 pressures that were credited by Pro Football Focus came up the middle. 1 by Andrus Peat, 2 allowed each by Nick Easton and by Eric McCoy. So when you see that, you get a little bit concerned. But then you also saw the moments to where the Saints got out on the perimeter and set up the screen passes, the ones that were effective, with guys like Eric McCoy, Andrus Peat, Teron Armstead, Ryan Ramczyk leading the way down the field because of how much athleticism they built along that offensive line, which is really what they wanted to do in terms of their decision to move on from Larry Warford, who wasn't the most athletic guy, couldn't get out there and really be mobile. So they added these guys like Eric McCoy, who ran a 4.89 40 at the combine at over 300 pounds, one of the fastest at his weight coming into the NFL. And so you like what you see from there. You want to see Cesar Ruiz get in there. And the thing that makes it tough is that you can't expect this offensive line to improve once you get Cesar Ruiz in there. You have to imagine that you have to kind of sit back and wait and see what happens, because you don't know. You have no idea what he's going to be right off the top, with no preseason, a very short offseason and training camp that he wasn't even able to take advantage of because he missed several practices coming into the year as well. So there's still some big question marks all along the offense, and in particular in the interior offensive line. But this best tandem right now when it comes to Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk at their tackles, and that's going to help keep Drew Brees clean, even if the interior has some growing pains as everything gets back together.
Yeah, definitely a solid unit. And then the last question I really had, coming into that first series, I noticed that they ran the ball with Latavius Murray twice, and then they tried to come in with what I'm going to refer to as a hook with Alvin Kamara there on the outside. I kind of felt like, we're going to throw you 2 big body blows to your defense there in the beginning and then try to get around you with some of that speed. That's why I call it kind of that hook, swinging that Alvin Kamara play at you. And I really liked it. I mean, it didn't work, in that first series, but I kind of really liked that mentality of trying to do that. And I was interested to see if that would kind of continue throughout the rest of the game. And as you already referenced, I mean, Latavius Murray leading the team in carries, Alvin Kamara making a much bigger dent against the Buccaneers defense in the passing game. As I'm watching, I'm kind of thinking, well, hey, that could be something Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones might be able to do. You might actually see Leonard Fournette come in, get a couple of carries to start off a drive, and then maybe see Rojo try to get a little bit of a gash play. To me, it feels like that's a little bit something new. And I know Latavius Murray isn't new to the roster, but just kind of that mentality and approach to setting up the run game. We know there's questions surrounding Drew Brees and the ability of his arm to stay healthy or stay, proficient for the entire season. Do you think that's something that the Saints will lean on? Do you think it's something they should lean on moving forward to give them a better chance in the postseason? Because right now the Saints kind of feel like the LeBron-led Cavs, where it's not so much how strongly do they get into the playoffs, because we know they're getting there, how well are they going to do in the playoffs. Yep. So I kind of feel like that's a good mentality maybe that New Orleans could carry on to help Drew Brees be more healthy, have more juice in that arm come postseason.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of utilizing Latavius Murray early in drives, early in the game, and then sort of pacing their way into more Alvin Kamara usage in terms of the outside zones, the stretch plays, those things that they also like to do with him. Utilize him much like we just referenced 2018, 2017, where he was paired with Mark Ingram. Allow Latavius Murray to be that big bruiser guy that can sort of set a physical tone and beat down some of those defensive lines and some of those front sevens early on in drives, and then get Alvin Kamara his touches in the red zone. Again, his lack of touches in the red zone last year really hurt his production, as well as, of course, the injuries that he was playing with, only playing at 75% self-estimated. But during this game, you saw him get most of his attention and most of his touches in the red zone, except for when they had to go to him for those, those check down passes and things like that, because the coverage was so good by Tampa Bay. And so I think that it is a formula that I would expect to see repeated, and it's certainly one that I hope to see repeated, because it's a good game plan and it's proven to work for the Saints system before, as we've seen it, during Alvin Kamara's Rookie of the Year campaign, for instance.
All right, let's wrap up with key inactives, key injuries, things of that nature moving forward. First, David, who are we keeping an eye on besides Mike Evans?
I mean, the Buccaneers seem to come out of this game pretty healthy. Mike Evans is going to be the big question, how that hamstring is recovering after the game. I mean, you saw the clip on Fox Sports of him running before the game and doing drills. And honestly, watching him during the game, I mean, I know a lot of people want to lean on that hamstring as why he had such low production, but I think you're taking a lot of credit away from Marshawn Lattimore, what he's been able to do. I mean, Mike Evans struggling against the Saints is not exactly a new thing to happen here in the NFC South. So I really don't chalk that up to the quote unquote injury as much as I do. It was just Mike Evans got shut down this week.
Okay.
So we're going to watch him, see how that goes. I'm sure they'll probably give him a day off here during the week leading into the Carolina game. But other than that, it seems like anyway that they've come away pretty healthy from this one.
All right. And everybody else, as far as the inactives, the players who did not even get a chance to play in this game, there were no key players missing from the roster.
No, none of the regular guys. I mean, they called up 2 practice squad guys, but they sent them back down as expected, and then they'll call up 2 more next week.
And feel lucky, because not many teams can say that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. All right. Saints injuries and inactives, Ross.
Yeah, so in terms of the players that were inactive before the game, we referenced Cesar Ruiz. He would definitely be one to keep an eye out on, although he was back at practice on Friday. He just didn't participate. So that's usually a good sign. We have to remember, too, that any of these players that are injured and didn't play and were inactive that aren't being moved to injured reserve likely means they're going to be back within the first 3 games, as injured reserve now has a short-term option. So even Marcus Davenport, that's expected to be a brief absence. And then Cesar Ruiz, I think you can expect that to be a brief absence as well. I would not be surprised to see both of them available against the Raiders, even if they pitch count them or anything like that. I would not be surprised to see them both back. PJ Williams was a late add to the injury report. Clearly, he ended up being inactive, but the Saints did just fine over on the defensive side. He would have been somebody you would have seen more in those nickel packages as opposed to CJ Gardner-Johnson, and CJ Gardner-Johnson playing more of the dime sets where we saw DJ Swearinger. But it didn't hurt the Saints at all to make that shift one spot over and then have DJ Swearinger in for the dime sets and CJ Gardner in for the or CD Deuce is what he prefers to be called, but his legal name is still CJ Gardner-Johnson. But he was still excellent at that nickel spot, and actually led the team in tackles with 10 total. I think the biggest injury. And Zach Bond was unable to go as well, which wasn't really a huge surprise. We knew that he was dealing with hamstring injuries and things like that throughout pretty much the second half of camp, and missed most of those. So, he's somebody that, again, I think you should expect to see within the first 3 weeks at the latest by the time that you get to hosting the Green Bay Packers week 3. And probably the biggest injury that I would say that came from the game, you saw, a couple of cramps and things like that. But Mike Thomas had his ankle rolled over by Latavius Murray late in the game. It has been called a high ankle injury. No one's really using the word sprain or anything like that. It's just being called a high ankle injury, and that, it's something that they'll continue to monitor. Nobody's ruling him out at this moment on Sunday for the Monday night game against the Rams. Because it's a Monday night game, we won't really get the first injury report until Thursday, so we'll continue to keep an eye on that. But even if the Saints have to put him on a pitch count against the Raiders to open up that Monday night game, I don't think that, I mean, obviously what we saw from the Saints this weekend is that they don't need to lean on the production of Michael Thomas as much. Certainly it helps to have his presence out on the field, however. So, I mean, if they end up putting him on a pitch count, fine. If he's ready to go, then that's even better for the Saints.
What is their backup plan? The Raiders are not a very good defensive team. We saw that already on Sunday.
Right.
So Saints should be effective offensively. But let's just say Michael Thomas doesn't play. Wide receiver Sanders, and then who's the first guy that kind of moves up the ladder?
Yeah, so I would imagine you would shift Emmanuel Sanders over to that X position, and then you have probably Traquan Smith who can line up either in the slot or out wide. And then I wouldn't be surprised to then see them bring Benny Fowler back up from the practice squad. He made the big special teams play last week, and then be able to use him a bit more in the slot or on the outside as well. Benny Fowler and Emmanuel Sanders, of course, played together at Denver. They have a very, very good relationship. Emmanuel Sanders is the reason that Benny Fowler is on this team. He brought him to a workout with Drew Brees. Drew Brees liked him, called the Saints and said, bring this guy into camp. And that's how he got on the team. So I wouldn't be surprised to see those three be your top guys. And then, of course, Deontay Harris and then Marquez Callaway, the young rookie, undrafted rookie who made the roster out of the University of Tennessee, getting some looks as well.
Any history? Because it's pretty rare. Saints, Raiders, if you had a storyline that you think you might work on for this week's game, what would it be?
Well, yeah, I mean, don't allow any 2-point conversions to close out the game for the loss. I mean, as the very last play of the game, that'd probably be the biggest one. A couple of years ago, that happened, of course, between the Saints and the Raiders. They opened up the season against the Raiders, one of the 5 straight losses that the Saints faced in the opening game during that 5-year stretch. But that's kind of probably the closest thing in terms of the history of these two teams. Other than that, it's just going to be a lot of fun watching John Gruden go up against Sean Payton. I mean, I think that is an all-star, much like Sean Payton against Bruce Arians was yesterday. To have Sean Payton and John Gruden go up against one another, that's a pretty all-star coaching.
And even though there won't be any fans, it still will be very interesting. NFL in Las Vegas. So at night too, Monday Night Football. Okay, so and David, the Bucks hosting Carolina, no fans. So which is strange. We thought that was pretty strange. Fans in Jacksonville, fans in Miami, but and only a limited amount. But no fans in Tampa. But still, home opener for Tom Brady against a Carolina team that is definitely ripe for the taking. This is that type of game that you have to take big steps forward.
Yeah, I mean, you like to see them do it, and this is one of those teams. You talk about good teams. If you're going to be a playoff team, you've got to win the games you're supposed to win. Then you got to win a few that maybe you're not supposed to win. They already dropped one that maybe they're not supposed to win, or that they flat out weren't favored to win this week. So they've already dropped one that they weren't supposed to win. This is one they're absolutely supposed to win. It's at home. It's against Carolina Panthers. You just saw Josh Jacobs just do all kinds of work against them. So you expect Rojo and Leonard Fournette, Shady McCoy to be able to do some similar type things. The Las Vegas Raiders secondary, not nearly as talented as the Saints secondary. So if Mike Evans is healthy, even if Mike Evans isn't healthy, was that
not even close?
Yeah, not even close. So even if Mike Evans isn't fully healthy, let's say Chris Godwin, Scotty Miller, Justin Watson, all those guys, they should still be able to handle them with OJ Howard, Rob Gronkowski. It's a game you have to win. And I mean, you hate to say must wins in week 2, but really when you're talking about just kind of the sanity of the team and hitting the panic button and all that stuff, I think if you're Tom Brady and the Buccaneers and you walk into your home locker room having lost to Teddy Bridgewater and Carolina Panthers, no shade to Teddy Bridgewater. Ross knows I'm a huge fan of Teddy B, but if you walk into that home locker room after losing your second straight game to open the season and your second straight divisional game to open the season, you can't come out saying, oh, we just got some things to clean up. And, you're in full blown. What is wrong here? And what kind of moves, even if drastic, do we have to do to get this thing righted? Because time is going to start running out quick. Every game in the NFL is 7% of your schedule. So that's like losing, 15 baseball games. I don't know the math on that, but you can't come in 0-2 from losing the Carolina Panthers and feel good about your year.
Yeah, big game for the Bucks to make sure, because 0-2, I know the statistics start to go down and down and down when you don't win games early on in the season. So you don't want to start 0-2, that's for sure. Like you said, especially in a division matchup, but we don't anticipate that that's going to happen. Still, though, interesting. battle of 0-1 teams on one side, a battle of 1-0 teams coming up this week on your side, Ross. So either way, we look forward to talking to you guys again around midseason when the game is in Tampa. Locked On Podcast Network. And guys, I really do appreciate you taking out your time on a Monday night to talk to me. And great job as always.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you.
Take care,
Happy
guys.
to do it.